are looking at accountability in the public sector. Accountability in the public sector. Under this topic, we shall be looking at, we'll look at the introduction, we'll look at the concept of accountability in public sector, fiscal transparency. We'll look at the IMF Code of Good Practices and Fiscal Transparency. We'll look at the condition that facilitate the promotion of public accountability. We'll also look at the measure to enhance the public accountability. We'll look at why there still exists no effect in public accountability in Nigeria, where there still exists no effect in public accountability in Nigeria, and we'll look at some examples, some questions at the end of this. There are 36 states and 774 local governments, each of which are allocation resources every month, aside from the major allocation to the federal government, without commensurate provision of the public with the adequate social amenity. This chapter differentiates between accounting in the public sector and private sector and the concept of public accountability. Under this topic, we shall be looking at the difference between accounting in public sector and private sector, and majorly the concept of public accountability. Concept of accountability in public sector. Accountability is an obligation to answer for the execution of one assigned responsibility. Accountability is an obligation to answer for the execution of one's assigned responsibility. It is the requirement to provide explanation about the stewardship of public money and how this money has been used. And majorly in public sector, when we are looking at this, we look at the concept of the economy. We look at the effectiveness. We look at effectiveness, and we look at efficiency. We look at the concept of efficiency. And accountability comprises two distinct components. The concept of accountability comprises two distinct components. We have rendering of account and holding to account. Rendering of account and holding to account. Rendering of account, what does it mean? It is by rendering of account that the information about the behavior of a public organization can be obtained. This means that without rendering of account, there can be no accountability. If there is no rendering of account, there will be no accountability. There will be no way to measure what the person has done against what the person has been asked to do. Let's look at holding to account. This involves the exercise of judgment and power over public officials. It involves the exercise of judgment and power over public officials. Public accountability can be achieved only if those who receive the account have power and ability to take action on the basis of those accounts, to take action on the basis of those accounts. Accountability is not just about the responsibility of public officer. Accountability is not just about the responsibility of public officer and the institution to the people they support to service, and the institution to the people they support to service, but also include a willingness. It also include a willingness on the part of the office holder to submit to scrutiny, to submit the account, to submit account for scrutiny, to submit account for scrutiny. That means for examination, to submit the account. Just like the accountant general of the federation is required to submit account to the accountant general, to the auditor general for the federation. Appropriate scrutiny, appropriate to the office he is holding. Examination, appropriate to the office he is holding. The principal means by which government department discharge its accountability responsibility is through public reporting, which lead us to the concept of fiscal transparency. Let's quickly look at the concept of fiscal transparency. What does this mean? This is the aspect of accountability which requires government to carry out all aspects of budgeting responsibility with openness. This aspect of accountability requires government to carry out all aspects of budgeting responsibility with openness, with trust, with basic values and ethical standards, so that it will have nothing to hide, from the public. It will have nothing to hide from the public. Where a government has something to hide from the public reporting is more likely to be infrequent, unreliable, and less comprehensive in order to hide material facts. Let's look at the IMF Code of Good Practice and Fiscal Transparency. The IMF stipulates a number of codes of good practices and transparency, and these include: 1. Clarity of role, the clarity of roles and responsibility. The clarity of role and responsibility. The government sector should be separated from the rest of the public sector and from the rest of the economy. Also, the policy and management role within public sector should be clearly stated and publicly disclosed. 2. Open budget process. Application of open budget process. Adoption of open budget process. There should be clear procedure for budget execution, monitoring, and reporting. The budget preparation should be guided by well-designed macroeconomy and fiscal policy objective. A budget preparation should be guided by well-designed macroeconomy and fiscal policy objective, and it is by this that some of these malpractices or corrupt practices can be mitigated. let's look at the public availability of information. Public availability of information is another point. The public should be provided with comprehensive information on past, current, and projected fiscal activity, on the major fiscal risk. The central government, which is the federal government, should publish information on the level and composition of its debt, and financial asset, significant non-debt liability, natural resources asset. Fiscal information should be presented in a way that facilitates policy analysis and promote accountability.